if you're a business owner or you have a business. So that you have to keep your business assets and your personal assets separated. The common mistake is when somebody goes out and starts a business, they do it as a sole trader. So because I, Ury Zhang, own a property, I also own this business. So now if I'm sued and I have debts and liabilities in this business, they're going to come after my properties.
I want to set up a business. What structure should I consider initially? Welcome to today's episode of Elevate Your Wealth, and today I have a special guest with me. So he is a premier lawyer, and today we're going to be talking about asset protection, especially around business owners and high net worth individuals. And he brings lots of years of experience. So I'm very happy to have Ury Zhang with me today. Welcome to the show, Ury.
Thank you very much, Victor. Very glad to be here.
Amazing. We're glad to have you as well. And really, I'm glad to be talking about a few things that lots of people don't think about, or think about it, but like, oh, I'll do with it later until something wrong happens. And they're like, oh, I wish I could have done this later. So we'll definitely dive into a lot. So today we'll break down the key strategies around asset protection, reducing risk, and ensuring long-term financial security, while also exploring, people's favorite word, tax efficiencies, and then the non-favorites, estate planning and business succession as well.
Very well put.
Yeah. Yes. So welcome today. Before we jump into the key aspects of asset protection, can you just tell us a bit about yourself, your hobbies, and
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Victor. Look, so I was admitted as a lawyer in Sydney in 2003, and so that this year makes it 22 years as a lawyer.
Oh.
So quite a while. I know I look young. And then and as I've been in my legal career, I've been in-house. I've been in private practice. So, for example, I was at Clayton Utz as a senior lawyer in property structuring and finance, and then at ANZ as an associate director in structuring and execution. And then 8 years ago, I decided to open up my own law firm. We started in Mun Place, and we've always had offices in the city, where we predominantly practice in property law, commercial law, and estate planning law. And it's a nice way. It brings in all of my experiences that I've gained over the years, and we're then able to deliver holistic solutions for clients, and our clients wide ranging, so from individuals to SMEs to high net worths to family offices. So that's our bit about my legal career in my firm.
Yeah.
And then personally, I also have wide interests.
I know you do.
So I like to I like to enjoy life, and so my interests includes wines, whiskies, watches, and also cars. And I think and thank you for attending our car event last year.
Yeah.
The Motorheads, which is a group of motoring enthusiasts, where we share our passions in cars of all types, as long as it's non-electric. And every year for Christmas, we host a Christmas party where we raise money for charity. And so thank you for attending last year's Christmas event, where we raised over $51,000 for the Sydney Children's Hospital Foundation.
Nice.
So looking forward to doing it again this year for another charity.
Yeah. Amazing. So I really enjoyed that event, and look, personally, I really enjoy when people, business owners, or just people come together to raise something for charity, because I think if everyone does that, the world would be a better place. So good on you, because I remember you running around that day and organizing a lot. So that's good. And it was a big turnout and some amazing cars out there. So
appreciate it. And look, and it's all started with a group of 5-10 friends who really got together and talked about cars. And now our group is informally, I think, over 350 members. Yeah. So it's just a real nice way, and it's a way to give back as well. It's that whole camaraderie and the whole supporting each other over a shared passion, and then trying to do some good out of it as well. Yeah. So really appreciate it.
Amazing. Thank you. So if you like cars and you need a lawyer, Ury, there's no one else.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll jump into the fundamentals now of asset protection. And sometimes, we in certain professions, we use jargons that people don't understand. So we're going to start with the basic. What is asset protection?
Okay, it's a great place to start. Now, asset protection simply is protecting your assets, right? So, I think what the context is, if you're a business owner or you have a business, so that you have to keep your business assets and your personal assets separated, right? Because think about it, like we all have, most people have different personal assets of different forms, shares, cash, motor vehicles, or properties, right? And so and they build that over time, and with for example, property for the family home, for the family and kids. And then when they did go out and then have a business venture, then you want to make sure if anything happens in your business side of things that it doesn't affect your personal assets and you don't lose your family home, which is the biggest risk. And those are the horror stories that you hear. And so simply, asset protection is and look, and I think it's very good that we're having this talk, because I feel, and I've seen it over the years, that people don't put enough time and effort to consider it, especially in the beginning. Yeah? Because look, it is expensive. You have to talk to professionals like financial planners like yourself, and lawyers and accountants, and there's setup costs. But too often, what we see is, in the beginning, everyone, you have a business idea and you get very excited and you go, look, and there's not much, money to start up this business. So you go, okay, I'm just going to run it. I'm going to, try it. We're going to do a MVP product. We're going to see how it goes. And then when we've got some money in the bank, we'll go try to deal with this other stuff later, right? And then inevitably you get busy. And then later on, it becomes too difficult to deal with, and because you've got different assets, you've got already businesses trading, so it's harder to do. So I think it's so important that anyone who is about to start a business really looks into this and thinks carefully about it and sets up the appropriate structures.
Yeah. I think the thing with I say high performing people, or just business owners in general, is you're really focusing on the next big thing to do and not worrying about what can go wrong. And time as well is an important thing, because you need to sit down and address it. So
and that's why professionals like yourself and will see a lot of these stories, and we've had a lot of lived experiences, right? And we can see now there's horror stories, I guess.
Yeah. So, and I think in terms of asset protection as well, what are the different risks? Like what exactly can happen? Because people are like, oh, I still don't get it, because it hasn't happened to them. Those that it has happened to is a no-brainer. It's like, yep, I'm doing it next time. I'm protecting myself. But what are the risks that could happen?
Yeah, and I think the best place to start with that is actually to talk about the different business structures, I guess, right? Yeah. And then what is asset protection? So the common mistake is when somebody goes out and starts a business, they do it as a sole trader. So that means me, Ury Zhang, instead of setting up a company or another vehicle, will just go set up an ABN or trading name and say Ury Zhang trading as Biz Lawyers. And now I then start my business. But what they don't realize, and then that's obviously the least amount of cost, the most cost-effective way to start a business. But then when Ury Zhang goes out to business and then something happens, so there's a lot of risks for businesses and business owners, right? So for example, there's obviously paying, if I employ people, it's making sure I satisfy PAYG obligations, my superannuation obligations, lodge my GBAS returns and pay my GST, right? So those are the risks. There are, if I sign a commercial lease for my office, then they expect then there's risk there as well, right? If I don't pay the rent. So for example, those type of things, if then I'm trading this business under my own personal name and then something happens to my business, then all of a sudden it becomes my personal assets are on the line. So because I, Ury Zhang, own a property, but I also own this business. So now if I'm sued and I have debts and liabilities in this business, they're going to come after my properties. Yeah. So that's the biggest risk with a sole trader.
Okay.
And then the next step is usually as people get a bit more educated on this process, then they'll set up a company. Yeah. And the company is probably the most popular and most common structure, and it's then a much better entity, because what it is a company then trades, and then the company's liability, except in certain circumstances we'll go through, company's liabilities, it's limited. It's this proprietary limited company, and it's limited to the shares. Yeah. And so if something happens to the company, most often then it's limited to the shares, and the shares, when you start a company, say for example $100 or 100 shares. Yeah. So that's it. And then if anything happens to the company, any assets that I own in my own name, for example, my family home, then is separated and it's protected. So that asset is protected against these liabilities.
Yeah. And when you say limited to the shares, so let's assume Ury Zhang has now set up Biz Lawyers, and Biz Lawyers has a shareholding. But if something happens, nothing can be taken from Ury Zhang himself. It's just anything that Biz Lawyers owns.
That's right, exactly. So Biz Lawyers will maybe have maybe a motor vehicle registered into it, or if they owned an office, then but we will also put that office in a different structure, right?
Yeah.
So then, anything, heaven forbid, was happened to Biz Lawyers, then it would be remote from anything else. Yeah? But there are some exceptions. So, for example, exceptions, I think I mentioned there, if there's any breaches of ATO, etc., then I can be personally liable.
Okay.
So that's one. If then as a company, so the structure we just talked about is a company structure. As a company, me as a director of the company, I have obligations under the Corporations Act. And so those obligations include acting in good faith and the best interest of the company, not trading whilst insolvent, and those kind of things. And so if I breach any of those obligations, then again, there might be personal liability to me. Yeah. And then the third thing is, and I mentioned before, was commercial leases. So landlords will always, when they're dealing with a company, because they know a company can be wound up, will always ask for a personal guarantee from a director of the company. So when I give that personal guarantee, then if I fail to pay the rent, then they will then be able to pursue me personally for whatever assets I have.
I see.
But outside of those three, so these are obviously very extreme examples. But outside of those examples, anything else that happens in a company is separated.
Okay.
And there's no personal. I think that's
Okay. So scenario now, let's assume Ury Zhang was wise enough and he set up Biz Lawyers. So now Biz Lawyers has few minor assets in the company, but then Biz Lawyers wants to get a commercial property. And I know the better ways to do this. We will definitely talk about that. But Biz Lawyers wants to do it in the company name. Okay.
Yeah.
And they do it in the company name, but the company, but the lender wants Ury Zhang to personally guarantee the loan. What is the biggest potential loss in that situation? And let's assume Ury Zhang has his principal place of residence. He did not put it in his wife's name. He has it in his name. What is the biggest potential loss in that regard?
No, it's a very good question. Now, with lending and loans, it's one thing that you can't escape from a personal guarantee most of the time. Yeah, because obviously, to be able to get that loan, when a company is borrowing, the bank is going to require personal guarantees. It's sort of no ifs or buts about it, because that's part of this bank's security. The security, and that's part of their risk profile when they make a loan to you. Yeah. So in that situation, so any property loans or any loans made by an entity will also always require personal guarantees. Yeah. Now in that situation, it's a little bit difficult, but the way that you're sort of protected is a bank would typically lend you a certain percentage of the value of that asset. Yeah?
Correct.
So on that commercial property, say let's call it 80%.
Yeah.
And so if Biz Lawyers fails to pay interest on that loan to the bank, then we'll be in default of that loan. And the bank will have two recourses. They'll have recourse to the asset, they'll have three recourses. They'll have recourse to the company. Yeah. So they'll have a charge over what used to be called a fixed and floating charge over all of the assets of the company, which is now called a general security agreement, and it's still a charge. Yeah. They will have access to the property. Yeah. So they can then obviously, as a mortgagee in possession, they can sell that property. And then third, they have access to me under the personal guarantee. Yep. Now, the banking documents are obviously drafted in a way that the banks can attack any of these three. Yep.
Yeah.
But typically in general, and I make generalizations here, the easiest approach is to go for the property. Yeah, because there's value in a property. They've got a mortgage over the property, and that mortgage grants them the power to appoint a receiver, a mortgagee in possession, and sell that property. Yeah. So say I bought that property was $1 million. The bank lent me $800,000. I then put in $200,000 plus stamp duty to buy that property.
Yeah.
Say the value, most of the time values will stay the same, if not increase. But the value. So let's just say, example, the value hasn't changed. So at the time when we're in default, the bank then takes over that property. They'll sell it for $1 million. They'll get repaid back the $800,000 plus whatever interest is owed. So let's call it $50,000. Then there's still $150,000 left. That money will come back to the company. Yeah. So so in that case, those cases, my family home is still protected. So now the flip side of that is the worst case scenario is, what if their now property is now $500,000? The bank goes and sells it. They get $500,000 back. They're still owed another $300,000 plus interest. So that's when they go, Ury Zhang, you've got now a family home over here. You need to now sell that home to repay it, because we're still short 300 with 300,000 plus interest.
Yeah.
And so you need to sell it to make us whole. And so that's when obviously that home is now at risk.
Yeah. Yeah. And for some people hearing that out there, they might be like, no, I'd never want to even think about that situation. And that's when having the right structures in place, really counts, because in financial planning, we always talk about this thing as the risk profile, gauging how comfortable people are in setting things. And, some people are very comfortable that like, yep, that's fine. If the business happens and happen to take my house, yep, that's fine. I understand. Some people are like, no, I never want that to happen. So I guess we can talk about what people can do around that. But before we go there, I think the next question is, okay, some people will be listening to this and be like, okay, I want to set up a business. What structure should I consider initially? And I guess, are there benchmarks where people can then say, okay, now I can go to the next one, so how do they decide the best structure?
A great question again. The simple answer is talk to yourself, me, and an accountant. And the three of us or four of us with the client can sit in a room and talk about it. Because in life, what it is there's actually no perfect structure. Every structure has advantages and disadvantages. So when you mention that risk profiling, it's so important, right? Because you need to work out where their risk tolerances are, what's important to them be able to work out the right structure. And then what's quite interesting, as we know, is through life changes.
Yeah.
So what might be important to them now in 5 years' time, 10 years' time is not so important, and therefore is not as efficient or doesn't work as well, right? So the first advice is always get good help, and if it's something that they don't do in their daily lives, speak to an expert, which is yourself, myself, and an accountant. And because we've got so much experience, from your aspects, you can look at their asset accumulation, how to help them in this journey, how to manage things from both a tax, investment, retirement perspective, right? We'll look at the legalities, the legal structures, and how that works. And then obviously the accountant is crucial because they have the tax advice. They'll look at, what's most tax effective for them, right? In any of this, yeah. And it's quite complicated. And so that's why you really need everyone to be on the same page in a room, fleshing it out.
True.
Yeah?
True.
And then I guess, so to take that question to the next step is, so we started with a sole trader, then the company's a bit more sophisticated. Then the next level of sophistication is what's a trust. Yeah. And obviously, Victor, you deal with this a lot, and you see it with your clients, and you advise your clients to have it. So there's a few different levels, two different trust vehicles. Yeah. So one is a unit trust. Yeah. So unit trust, where the trust has units which it issues basically to the owners of that trust and in a specific portion, and that reflects their ownership. So similar to a company where a company has shares, the trust has units. Yeah. So that's fixed. So company gets taxed at the company tax rate. So that can be at 25 to 30% depending on that company. Yeah. So the company will get taxed, and then after it gets taxed, it can then distribute to its shareholders. And then when it gets distributed to shareholders, it'll be taxed at the marginal tax rate of that shareholder. So say if individually I'm on the top marginal tax rate at 45%. So then what that means, then the company pay tax at 30%. So then I will get input tax credit for that 30%, and then I'll need to top up and pay the balance, which is 15%. Yeah. But then if, say, my wife wasn't working and she's at the lowest marginal tax rate, which is 15%, then she gets a 15%, I guess, so effectively a credit on the tax that the company's paid.
Yeah.
So she gets that back. Yeah. So that's the company. Now, in the unit trust, what happens there is the unit trust doesn't get taxed. Right? And so whatever income that unit trust makes and distributes to the unit holders, then the unit holders will get taxed at whatever marginal tax rate they are. Yeah, that is. Yeah. So that's the one. So that's a unit trust. Yeah. Then the next level of sophistication, and it actually gives you much better discretion. And before I came onto this meeting, I had a bit of a refresher.
Yeah.
What lawyers have is a really useful tool, which is a matrix.
Okay.
Which looks at every different structure, and then you look at the structure from a lot of different levels. Yeah. So the first one is income tax. Which one is how does income tax differ from each of these structures? The second one is asset protection.
Yeah.
And then how does that work across the different structures? Then you have things like land tax. Again, land tax, if it's a property that this entity is owning, is also different against all the structures. Then you have capital gains tax.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, different. And then you have setup costs. Yeah. And then when I was looking at it again and refreshing on this, the discretionary trust seems to have the most points in most of these categories, except for the setup costs. It's most expensive for setup.
Yeah.
But other than that, it seems to be, it scores highly in each of these categories.
Yeah.
And I'll explain more about it. So a discretionary trust is usually referred to as a family trust. So it's a family discretionary trust. And how that's usually set up is a trustee. The trustee can be an individual or a company. We'll always recommend a company, again, to give it another layer of protection. So then the company is the trustee of this family trust. And then what it does is the family trust is able to then have a class of beneficiaries. Yeah. So in my family trust, it will have me, my wife, it will have our parents, it will have it's a general class of beneficiaries, children, siblings, cousins, whatever, right? Yeah. And so what that does is it allows me to distribute income across multiple beneficiaries. Yeah. And then we'll be able to then use their marginal tax brackets. Yeah. So it becomes a really useful tool to distribute income to family, which if you're going to do that anyway, great.
Correct.
And then get these tax advantages from it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so that discretionary family trust, so you as a trustee, you have full discretion on who you distribute to. So no one has an entitlement to that asset. Yeah. So that way it gives you a bit of asset protection as well.
Yeah.
So if, for example, one of my beneficiaries is going through bankruptcy at the time, if they were a shareholder or a unit holder, then they would receive those assets in their personal name. Yeah. And then that bankruptcy proceeding will be able to take that as assets. But because they're in my family trust, they can't, because I say I have full discretion to distribute to them, and I'm not going to distribute anything to them. So then they have no entitlement to this. So you can't touch that asset. Yeah. So again, from asset protection, it's very sure. Right? Yeah. So the benefits, again, the additional benefits of the family trust is that in circumstances, again, this is not tax advice, and consult tax expertise. From my not
all general,
yeah. So again, you get so if you hold an asset for more than 12 months, you get a capital gains relief. If it's in a family trust, if it's in your individual name. but you don't get it in a company. Yeah, so you don't get a CGT 50% discount for holding it for more than 12 months. You get it in a family trust. Yep. So again, another benefit.
Yeah.
The next point is land tax. So one of the negative things about a family trust is in your personal name or in a company, there are thresholds before the government starts taxing you for land tax. But in a trust, there is no threshold.
No threshold.
So from the first dollar of land value, you're getting tax. And the land tax is, I think, 1.6% at the moment, right? If you're not in premium or other territories. Yeah. So that's probably one of the disadvantages of family trust. And again, so see, this is why it's so important to talk to yourself, speak to financial planner, accountant, lawyer, because, all of these, it's so complex. There's all these different advantages and disadvantages, and, there's no perfect solution. So, you've got to work out what suits you, right?
Yeah.
But before, I guess, so I love family trust.
Yeah.
Two negative parts about a family trust is setup costs. Yep. So it's a little bit more expensive setup. You're going to have to set up a company. You're going to set up a family trust. You're going to have to speak to accountants, lawyers. Yep.
Yeah.
And then every year you're going to have to pay ASIC fees, and then you're going to have to do accounts. You do accounts in any entity anyway. Yep. So a little bit more expensive. The other thing that you will never use a family trust for, and we've seen this is a real horror story.
Yeah.
One of our clients came to us and told us they went to see an accountant, and they said the accountant told us use a family trust and put our principal place of residence in this family trust, which is the worst thing you can do. Look, again, it gives, when I say that, I caveat by saying it's good in asset protection. So obviously, when your family trust, it's going to be protected. But the real bad thing about having a family trust is it's not your principal place of residence. You can only get that if it's in your own name. That means you're not exempt from land tax in New South Wales because it's not it's not in your own name, and that means also capital gains tax. Now,
correct.
Would you say that property is obviously a key asset for most individuals, right? And it's and especially in Australia, we have a love affair.
Yeah, we just love property, and good reasons why. So
and so then most and your principal place residence, your family home is probably one of your significant assets, and looking at history will have the greatest capital growth, right? Correct. And so then imagine owning it. So say I bought this family home 30 years ago for, call it $500,000, and now it's worth $5 million.
Yeah,
there's a huge capital gain of $4.5 million. Because it's in my family trust, I'm going to have to pay that capital gain. I get a 50% discount, but I've got to pay it. But if you owned it in your personal name, you won't have to pay
nothing. Yeah. So even from an estate planning tool as well, like the next generation, why should they pay that when you could have just held it in your name? And I think even just relating this back to that first example from the Ury Zhang that ran into trouble because Biz Lawyers owed something. Would you say a good choice could have been having the family name in your spouse's name?
No, having the family home, definitely. And look at I was having this conversation with a client who's purchasing a business this morning, and look, that's I guess the most common practice. It's BAU, right? Yeah, and it works most of the time. The only obviously complexity there is you got to stay happily married. So just remember that. So make sure because otherwise a divorce can be nasty, and then having that asset in somebody else's name. So we would only recommend it if it's your spouse or partner. Yeah, correct. And obviously make sure you have a harmonious relationship. Yeah, because the flip side is they could sell the asset and then run away, right? So that's another risk. Yeah. But something that
and I think that risk is more from them being nasty versus a divorce. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not a lawyer. In terms of family law perspective, if anything was to happen and they went to courts, that is still both matrimonial asset. So
I think you're right there, Victor. Yeah. So I'm not a family lawyer by any means. But it's when they look at it, they look at the pool. And they look at the assets, and it'll be part of the family assets. Yeah. They'll also look at who contributed. So provided we, me and my wife both contributed to the deposit and the loan and everything else.
Yeah.
It's matrimonial.
We'll get a family lawyer in soon, so I will confirm that.
Nice one.
Yeah. So definitely very enlightening with the family trust perspective. I think it just helps and does wonders for lots of people that have different family members and can distribute and want to build wealth. Because I always tell people, end of the day, when they sit down with me, it's like you're building wealth for something, and about 80% of people, they're actually building wealth for others, not themselves. Okay, so that should be passed on, or rather that will be passed on, and you want to do it in the right way.
No, completely agree. Because it's your legacy, right? We work so hard. You and I work through most of our professional careers to build something, and so you want to make sure that's protected, right? That's so important. And which and just on the family trust example, if I can just finish off on this point, which is in that particular client's scenario, for them to fix that problem because they didn't have the right structural advice, didn't speak to professionals, was going to be very costly. So then every year they were paying land tax, and then they came to us for only a few years after they purchased property. So the capital gains wasn't that much.
Yeah.
But the only real way to resolve that issue was actually to sell that and transfer that back to their own personal name, which has they're paying another stamp duty. So they paid stamp duty buying that asset, and then if they were going to transfer it to their personal names, they were going to have to pay stamp duty again.
Yeah.
So think about that as a transactional cost on a multi-million-dollar asset. Right, they could have been saved if all they had to do was spend some time and get some good advice. And in that case, they probably got some bad advice from an accountant. But we don't know because the accountant might have said, put some property assets in your name in that trust structure to give that protection, but maybe not your family home. Right? Yeah. So they didn't get that and maybe drill down into it, which is what we'll do. Yeah.
Correct. And I think that's the key point as well, because people may be listening to this and like, yep, I got all the answers I need. I'm going to go do this. Like, no, you don't have all the answers. You need to actually do this yourself because, yes, we were talking about holding assets in family trust, but that person maybe said, okay, yep, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to move all my assets to family trust. Like, well, that's not the right thing to do. So it's always good to get some personal advice in that regard. And you mentioned about costs as well in terms of setting up the family trust. I think costs are very relative and subjective, right? Like to me, it's a no-brainer for a business owner that is turning over a certain amount, or high-performing professionals like surgeons. The cost is very, very negligible to them. And that way you get a lot more protection and just the right thing to do as well. So yes, cost is very, very, very relative, and it's not as high as most people think.
That's right, definitely.
Yeah. So another key thing as well for business owners or just people in general or people planning, because some people want to have the whole 10-year plan before they're doing anything. So for them, they want to set up a structure. They want this structure to be able to take on investors. Okay. They want this structure to as well be in such a way for tax efficiency as well. Are they setting structures you would get them to consider over others? Or what are your thoughts in terms of people that want to take on?
Yeah, no, it's a great question because it segues my fascination and love affair with family trust. Yeah, another negative point which I should have spoken about and which you just now alluded to is what happens if you want to take in investors in your family trust. You can't. That's one real negative part of it. So whereas a company you can issue more shares and issue different classes of shares, but my family trust only has. Or is only to be used for my family. So unless the investor is my family member, which it won't be, then you can't use that vehicle. So again, so then there's another layer you can add. Yeah. So with my own personal structure, I have a unit trust with a corporate trustee, where all my units are currently owned by my family trust. Yeah. So what that allows me to do is in my unit trust, I can then issue new units. So again, if you wanted to invest my business, Victor, so I would then issue units in my unit trust, and you would probably own those units using your own SMSF or family trust or other entity, right? And so then we would both own units in the unit trust. Yeah, so that would really be a better structure if you're going to take on investors. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we would recommend that. Yeah.
Okay.
So it'll be like a 2-layer. It'll be a unit trust with a family trust.
Unit trust, family trust. Okay. And is it safe to assume that some professions have setting structures that are better for them than other professions? Because I think the legal industry, I hear lots of them having those structures.
Yeah, no, definitely. And because they understand it a bit better and they get better advice. Yeah. And so different industries, I think medical industries do well. Certain service industries will do well as well. Because what a traditional structure was, you have one entity which owns assets and owns IP and earns income, and then you have another service entity which has the lease obligations, has the payroll obligations, that kind of stuff, right? So you could have two companies or two entities there as well. Yeah. So it's really lawyers, accountants, financial planners, we'd love this kind of stuff, and we can go on all day about it. But it's also finding that right balance and threshold, right? What's simple enough to manage, still not going to cost me an arm and leg, and that is going to give me that flexibility, like you say, for example, when I want to scale, when I want to grow my business, when I want to go interstate, international, or if I want to take in investors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very interesting. And these are good topics or good things to consider, because most businesses will grow, especially if you survive. And once you get to that growth, it's very hard to undo all these things. So good getting advice. I think another key part is the estate planning that comes with that. So how should business owners structure things to get some asset protection and then factor in things like succession planning?
Very important. And again, it goes to the legacy we create, right? We work so hard for family members, future generations, all of that kind of stuff. So and we love working with yourself, Victor, on this, is because this is something you cover with all of your clients and in your fact find, in your risk profile. And you always say, think about your estate planning. What do you have in place, right? And it's so important. And when you look at it, you've got to look at it, holistically. Yeah? So you've got to think now, okay, what are you going to leave to your future generations? How are they going to take over? Yeah. So how are they going to if you have that plan and children who will then come into the business, how would that happen? So that's when you've got to talk to us and then think about what is my existing structure, what are the mechanisms in there, and then the will. Yeah. How do I then safeguard that and make my wishes effective after I'm gone? And so again, and that's something we focus on. We've been really focusing on the wills and estate planning side of the business because it's so important. Right? And people. The issue with having a estate plan, as you know, because you do it all the time, is everyone knows that they need it, but no one wants to do it. They always want to put it. You push it back, and you got to ask difficult questions, and you got to think about difficult things. You got to think about, if I pass, who's going to be the guardian of my children? Who's going to be my executors? Those difficult questions are sometimes so hard that you just push it away and say, "I'm not going to die. I'm just going to be okay, and then we'll deal with it later." And then that's what most people do, right? And I get that. I understand and get that. But you've got to then, and so that's why we come into it. We look at, one of the things we do is we look at, okay, what is, and we'll work with you, and your team's fantastic in this because you'll give us an asset list of, here's the assets, this is how they own it, this is their business assets, etc. Right? And so we'll say, all right, what's your plans for business? Do you want to sell it? Do you want somebody to come in? Yeah. And then we'll go, okay, is there a mechanism for to come in? So for example, in a family trust scenario, if I'm the appointer of my family trust, and if I pass, then who's going to be the appointer? If there's no appointer, then the family trust is going to have to be wound up. So then what we can do is, in our will, and we'll check the trust deed first to see what succession mechanisms are there. And then if there isn't any, we'll say in the will, then we will nominate who the appointer is. So that family trust will continue. Yeah. And so I think that's important. The second thing we could do was the company that is the trustee of the family trust who owns the shares in that company.
Yeah.
And then pass those shares to somebody else. Yeah. And so by thinking of that and going through that process with yourself, then we can then say, all right, this is how we're going to implement it so that, there's going to be continuation of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just very important because, look, over the last year, we've had a few joint clients where one passed away. Okay. And for those of them that did the estate planning, was just smoother journey, while as those that didn't, it wasn't. So I think most people really need to zone in as to, okay, what do they want for their beneficiaries? Because no one wants to pass away before due time, but it's just very crucial, especially when you have lots of assets in the family trust and the company, like everything in the business. If you're not functioning in that business, or if the family trust is not functioning because there's lots of confusion for a few months, you can lose the whole value in the business.
Completely.
That's everything you've worked for years. So definitely very important. Will, power of attorney.
Yeah.
Definitely important, and it's good.
Yeah, and completely. And if I can just add, so on that point, so people sometimes people don't often think how difficult is it for someone else to manage it while I'm gone. So because we have such control of our business, we know where everything is, right? So if you don't have those conversations, if you don't have that forward planning, then it's going to be a nightmare for them to start working it out. And you're right, in that period of time, if no one's operating that business, what's happening to that business? It's eroding, competitors are taking clients are moving away, and then you've actually eroded value, right?
Yeah.
And which actually brings me to think, especially in a partner scenario, there's a very useful thing which you know better than I do and help your clients, and maybe you can explain more about it, which is actually that buy-sell insurance.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think, you bring a good point, because for most business owners who have partners, they never think about, okay, what would happen to the business if my partner dies, my business partner? Well, generally what happens is the business partner's spouse or beneficiary will take over the business, and you as the surviving business partner would probably think about it and be like, well, that person's beneficiary is not bringing in the skills needed to run the business. So now you're stuck with someone that owns maybe 50% of the company, and you can work together with them, but you're stuck in that. So that's where things like a buy-sell agreement comes into place to help both business partners. And it actually helps both, because people are thinking, well, it's just for the one that passed away. It's like, no, it's both. It helps the one that passed away in terms of your family getting value for what you've worked for, and then helps you as well in terms of ensuring that you can keep the business going. You can now worry about how you can get someone else to fill in any gaps, rather than worrying as to how you could work with this new business partner.
And completely, because say go in business. We go in business because we know each other's skill sets, it's complementary, we know how to work together. All of a sudden, you're now dealing with my wife who's not a loyal business owner.
Yeah.
It's going to be frustrating, right?
Yeah.
And so then the other thing I think the buy-sell agreement and also buy-sell insurance does is two things. It provides a mechanism for the calculation of valuation of the business.
Yeah.
And then it also provides you a liquidity event, right? Because the problem is then if there's, you want to now buy my half shares, which is what my estate wants as well. But then how do you do it?
Where does the money come from?
Where does the money come from, right?
Yeah.
So and if you can't sell the company, then...
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So very important, because people think about buy-sell as to just a few things, but it covers if you pass away, if you're totally and permanently disabled, even for short period of times when you're away, it's like what actually happens at that point in time, So I definitely think people need to zone in. I call it involuntary business succession planning. Because that's very important to have in place as well.
I like that, right?
So, Ury, as you said, we can talk for days and months about this, okay? But I think there may be people out there that have heard this and you're like, okay, I need to do something. I need to protect my family. I need to protect my assets. And different people need to do different things at different life stage, So what should be the first step for them to do? How can they actually reach out to you? Or is there any step they can take even before reaching out to you?
No, thank you. So obviously we work very well together, so they can always contact you, and then you have that preliminary chat about what they want, and then you can then sort of work out whether it's a legal solution, tax solution, and then we can then start working together. But if you'd like to also contact me directly, any viewers out there, and listeners. So my business is called Biz Lawyers and Advisory. The website is www.bizlawyers.com.au. So bizlawyers.com.au. So we've got you can check out our website. It's got our contact details on there. We've also even got a YouTube channel as well.
Oh, yeah.
Where we because estate planning is so important to us, and especially with the intergenerational wealth transfer. Right. What are they saying is the value of this intergenerational wealth transfer?
I know it's
the baby
billions.
boomers?
I actually don't remember the amount, but it's a lot.
It's huge because the baby boomers are some coming to retirement age, right?
Correct.
Or more,
Yeah. And
post-retirement age.
as the world has it, your wealth has boomed. So
I know, 100%, definitely, yeah. And so on our YouTube page, we've done a lot of videos explaining estate planning, explaining the issues if we don't get it right, and some stories we've shared on that estate planning. So
yeah. Amazing. It's been great having you on the show, Ury. So as Ury said, we'll have the link to his website at the bottom of the screen. So please feel free to reach out to him. So he has helped me personally and also helped my clients as well. So he's good at what he does. And for people out there listening to this, definitely strongly suggest doing something about it. It's definitely not as expensive as you think you should. As you think it is, so get your asset protection in place, get your estate planning done. So that way, if anything unfortunate happens, your beneficiaries taken care of and you and them have the peace of mind now. So thanks for tuning into this session. It's been an amazing session, and feel free to follow, like, and share with anyone who would benefit from this.